Brian Howlett here with Pro Video Coalition, and 25 to 250 from 1970s to now, we are talking about a cinema zoom that that length, that range has a long history. I used to own an Angenieux 25 to 250. I loved the range. That was an old lens. I didn't quite like the optical elements, but now Canon has a new one that's coming out, that's been announced. And we're going to go to Larry with Canon, who's going to talk a little bit about this lens. I'm incredibly curious about it because it's a really useful range if you're shooting drama or if you have like interviews or anything else that like for like magazine news shows or anything else. So Larry.
Yes, sir. Let me pull this up with my screen share. So we're talking about a CN 25 to 250 millimeter Cine Servo. That is the formal labeling of this product. Now, as you know, we already had two Cine Servos in the marketplace. The 7x17 was quite popular, nice range. And then we brought out that quite remarkable 20 by in the bottom right. And that was probably one of the greatest development projects we undertook in terms of the sheer challenge to do Super 35 with a range like that, but also to do it with the optomechanical design that brought it in compact and lightweight. And that has become a very, very favorite lens in the wildlife and documentary world.
Actually, I'm going to pause you for a second. I talked to cinematographer Greg Frazier after he shot Rogue One, and he was using the 20 times, and he was gushing about this lens. I think it was Mary Magdalene. He was in Italy shooting with it. I just want to let you know, like my skills aren't even a teaspoon of what his are. And he loved this lens. And everyone I've seen with it, have used it from an interview with a Tiger documentary. This lens has become a favorite because of the incredible range. If you guys get a chance to try it out, you can rent them. We'll have, most people can only rent them, but you can rent it. You will not be dissatisfied. Beautiful lens. Okay, I had to interrupt. I had a little story.
All right, so we felt that we could bring something in there in between, and as you say, the sweet range that's been established. Certainly in the movie world, those who do use zooms have always liked that range of the 24 or 25 out to about 250. So we said we would do that, and we would leverage all that we learned on that 20 by shown on the bottom right there to bring this lens in compact and lightweight. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But here's the basic specs. It is T295. And it holds that constant over a little more than 7:1 zoom range out to 187 millimeter. After that, it will ramp gently down to 395. So 7:1 plus, you have flat, wide aperture, and then a small ramp. 11 blade iris, that gives you that lovely bokeh and the control of highlights, 4-foot close focus, and the 3 20 pins on the drive unit for broadcast zoom and focus control, or the third can be used for interface into virtual systems. Now, it does have an extender. Like our 20 by lens, we put in a 1.5 range extender, which takes you out to 375 millimeter, and you only lose one stop. Now, it's interesting. This was designed as a Super 35 millimeter lens, but the nature of the optics in that extender is when you switch in the extender, you now get full frame coverage. You get the 34 millimeter, 43 millimeter diagonal image circle. You might say, well, that's, to have to get full frame coverage when I'm at T4.4. But what we say is, look, it's basically a Super 35 lens. So consider this a little bonus that we give you, as well as the bonus of a 1.5 extender, that you can get the full frame coverage if you need it for certain shots. So it just adds to the flexibilities. You can have an EF mount. You can purchase it either, and then if you wish or have to, you can have it converted at a Canon service center from one to the other. That shows you it mounted on a camera there, just so you get a sense of what it looks like. Now here's a little bit more about the specs. There are the two focus controls, the manual one and the that other 0.5 pitch in there, depending on the nature of the drive unit that you're using. 0.5 for zoom and 0.4 for iris. Now, I mentioned the CN20x50. The thing that was, as well as that range of 20 times, the thing that was remarkable about this, and the thing that taxed our designers, and they told us stories about how long they were in simulation, was the plea from the wildlife people to give them a lightweight, to give them that range, but lightweight. And they set us a goal of 15 pounds, and we brought in a 14.5 pounds and a length of less than 16 inches, which is really quite remarkable. And it was all of that optomechanical science and the optics inside that I've drawn it to scale here. Just look at the weight and the length of this baby, this new CN10x25, 6.7 pounds. There's nothing like it. It's quite astounding. And I think that's going to make it very, very popular, because it means you've got a lens like this that's shoulder mount and all sorts of capabilities in movie and in television. So that's it on the lens.
When people see the 25 to 250, it works with dual pixel autofocus, and then they see, I kind of know how like the market goes. People are like, oh, it's T3.95 in the long end. I'm letting you everyone know 250 at f4 or T3.95 is a really hard aperture to pull focus on long lenses, and don't let that number concern you, because 5.6 and f8 at 250 is gonna essentially give you the look, that cinema look that you're looking for. Yes. I know this from experience. The weight, what's the front element size, so people can know if they want to put on
the
polarizer?
10x25, it's 114 millimeter.
114 millimeter.
Yes.
And then how much does that lens? How much are we going to talk about cost?
This lens will come in at $29,999.
And does that come with the servo zoom as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Is there ever an option to get it without the servo zoom?
No, not yet. We are the plan at the moment is we sell it as a combination. You can remove the zoom if you do want the manual, but at this moment we don't have a plan. That could change if the demand from the marketplace is sufficient.
Okay, and let me ask you one more question about, well, maybe one more question. It might be two more questions. But so with the dual pixel autofocus, do you need to have the zoom rocker control on the camera to control it, or does it control it through the? Now that I look at it, I think I've answered my own question.
Yes, it controls through, and it does have the cable, so that the camera, through the camera itself, you can control it.
So you have to have that grip on.
Yes.
Okay. And then the other question I have is, so now that the cameras, a C300 Mark III and a C500 are, lens mount changeable, do you see yourself like someone maybe changing the camera's lens mount before changing this lens's lens mount? Because the lens has to go to a service center, whereas the camera can be done at home, right?
Yes. The lens still has to be done at the service center.
Okay. And then
we are talking to some of our top dealers who have in-house capabilities, and talking about doing training so that they would be able to do it, but that has yet to be worked out.
And then the last question, this is the last question, is when is this lens available?
Unfortunately, with the sad situation we have worldwide, all we can say is later this year, but absolutely this year.
Absolutely this year.
Until we know all the supply chain issues and manufacturing issues, but we'll get it out as fast as we can, but absolutely this year.
Okay. So lenses are great, but you need to have a camera to throw that lens on, and Canon has what sounds like on paper an incredible camera announcement.
Yes, we do. We're very proud of it, and let me move into our new edition, the EOS C300 Mark III. And this is following closely on the heels of our introduction of the C500 Mark II, and that's very important for the reason I'll show you in a moment. This is the C300 Mark III, and if you've had your hands on the 500 Mark II, you'll see it's physically identical, and that's because it is. Mechanically, ergonomically, these two cameras are identical. There's only one difference between them, and it's illustrated here, and that is the front end imaging section. On the 500 Mark II, we have full frame 5.9K. On the new C300 Mark III, it's Super 35 4K. But everything else is common between them. The convertibility, the modularity, the expandability, the connectivity, identical between these two cameras. So the strategy from Canon was, there are two constituencies out there. Super 35 is established worldwide. There is this growing affection for full frame, but we just believe both are going to be extremely important all over the world. So we felt bringing these two out almost simultaneously allows us to offer all of the advantages to both constituencies.
And there is a century's worth of 35 millimeter,
Indeed,
lenses available. If you want to go down the vintage pipeline, you want to pull up Zeiss B speeds, you want to pull up old Canon, not older, but the CNEs or the now reduced price, some of the Canon zooms, you're gonna have a harder time finding cinema lenses for that C500 Mark II than you will for the C500 Mark III. Both are great cameras. Both are great cameras.
So I'm going to compare the sort of high-end specs between the two. On the left is the pretty well known now, the 500 Mark II. So you will see that both cameras in that basic unit, what we call the base unit, 3.9 pounds weight, you have raw recording. In the 500 Mark II, 5.9K raw to 60 frames. In the new camera, the 300 Mark III, 4K to 120 frames raw on board.
Oh, man.
Now, 3.9 pounds, you can put this in a drone and shoot movies or whatever. That's what's very powerful about the modularity, the approach we took here was to make a base unit.
And you could put a Canon lens on that works with the dual pixel autofocus.
Yes.
And there you go. Again, you are set for kind of far away shooting if it's on a drone. Exactly.
Now, the other thing is, if you don't want to shoot RAW, and not everybody wants to shoot RAW, we have the XF-AVC codec in there, built in to the base unit, and that allows you to shoot the 4K to 120 frames, AVC Intra, or if you want to extend your recording time, you can go XAVC Long GOP, switch the codec, still doing 422 10-bit, but Long GOP. Now you've got extended recording time. If you put a Super 16 lens on the C300 Mark III, you will now do a crop, and you can select the sensor to give you out 2K or HD. Again, with the choice of XF-AVC Intra or Long GOP for extended recording. And here you can see that the 2K goes up to 180 frames per second in both of those modes. So very, very flexible camera in terms of its capability and being able to mount different lenses on it.
On the RAW capability, can you switch between 10-bit RAW and 12-bit RAW, or is it just one RAW capability?
No, the way it works is it's 12-bit. It's 12-bit up to 30 frames per second. When you move from 30 up towards 50, 60, it becomes 10-bit.
Okay.
And that's the same on the 500 Mark II.
And that does it just in the camera. You don't have to change a menu setting to get to those.
That's right. It automatically will go to the 10-bit once you cross the 30 frame per second. So here we go. Our new sensor, we label it DGO dual gain output. I'm just pointing here that we've had from the outset in our cinema cameras with the birth of the C300 almost 10 years ago, we always had 2 photodiodes inside each photo sight. And that, at the beginning, that was a strategy to give us extended dynamic range on the C300. I think we were unique in the industry to have the 2 photodiodes. And the reason there's 2 photodiodes is you're able to read out faster and to scoop out all of the electrons, and that's what extends the dynamic range. Later, our engineers said, well, we got 2 photodiodes. Why don't we do a phase measurement? And that's when dual pixel CMOS autofocus was born, exploiting the dual photodiodes. Now we're exploiting them another way for the 3rd time with the 300 Mark III, 2 photodiodes and 2 gains. And we simplistically show it like this. We will be giving out some technical information shortly to better explain this, but at the moment, all we can say is we have 2 gains, and then we do a blending, and what that does is extends the dynamic range down towards the bottom, not the highlights. We're extending the deep shadowed capability of the camera, and we think that's important. It's a response to a lot of discussions we had with DPs and directors who shoot movies, shoot the episodic television, where you always have these, or you have lots of these moody, dark lit scenes, candle lit scenes, but a lot of color detail in the shadows. And they love to have those moody scenes, and then to the best of their ability in post-production, lift out those shadow details. So that's really the core behind this approach. And we will be intrigued to see what the producers, the production world does with this. The camera does have hybrid log gamma and PQ, your choice. Or it has a 3rd choice. You can say, I don't want to do either of those. I'll just work with Canon log 2 or log 3. So you have all of those choices. The hybrid log gamma, as you know, is probably more favored in the live television world, and the PQ is very favored in the pre-recorded movie episodic television. But the choice is the users. Let's see. This is a picture of the new lens, the 10 by 25, mounted to the C300 Mark III. And this was a shoot we did some weeks ago for the demo video that was going to be unveiled at NAB. But I just put it in here to give you a sense that with that remarkable lens and this camera, even with all the outrigging on it, you have a shoulder mount system. And on this production, they had shoulder mount, they had handheld, they had Movex, they had every possible configuration. And last but not least, speaking of configurations, a point that we were going to make at NAB was our expanding line in the cinema, where we have A cameras like the 700, full frame or Super 35. And now some of these new cameras that we brought out recently and are about to bring out from the still photography side, as you've probably read, they are endowed with pretty impressive video capabilities. And for example, the EOS 1DX Mark III full frame, as is the C700 full frame. So here you have a B camera, C camera. This has 1DX Mark III has 5.5K raw onboard capability. The 700 has a raw capability. The EOS R5, which is full frame, has raw capability at 8K. So, and then the C500 Mark II is going to come in as a very nice full frame B camera. So what we're trying to do is do a melding, if you will, between our more advanced offerings on the still photography side with their extended video capabilities, and broaden this family. And in full frame, in Super 35, it could be the 700 with the 300 Mark III as a B camera, Super 35. And again, the 1DX Mark III and the EOS R5 could be B and C cameras, and the 500 Mark II.
A lot of people may not understand the reason for a nice rounded ecosystem is if you have like the 700 and you have a multi-camera shoot, you typically, and for me, if I'm doing a magazine show, I don't have a whole other camera that's exactly the same as that, because it's just can be a little expensive, but you could have the 700 and a 300 or 500 and a 300, and then the 1D or the R5 coming in and helping you in those moments when you need an extra camera.
Yes.
So like,
and for example, that EOS R5, and the 1DX Mark III, we put Canon logs into those so that there is that better match. And in terms of the color science of them, they do match very well with the Cinema EOS. So it is, as you rightly said, an expanding ecosystem that we're going to put increasing effort behind to offer more shooting flexibilities.
And it also, if it really benefits you as a DP if you're able to deliver, 3 to 5 cameras with the same, base look.
Yes.
Nothing is harder for a colorist than taking a Sony and matching it to a Canon. So I speak
heard
from
the stories.
Experience in that one. That is very hard to do.
Indeed. And then I was going to just wrap up that we are extending now into more systemization. And this is a recognition that the broadcast television world and the sports world are, they're still centered very much on 2/3 inch, but increasingly we're seeing large format coming in for certain productions, sports, etc. They like that cinematic look on certain cameras. So we are working with multi-dyne, and this is a system we were going to show at NAB, and it's a system where we've been doing a lot of work recently, and we're going to be exposing this to the sports world and the mobile truck people. With a multi-dyne back end on our C300 Mark II and a 300 Mark III. We then have the SMPTE fiber cable to a base station, and then the base station will bring that into the system of the truck or a broadcast infrastructure. You'll see an unusual operation panel down there, the Scarhov, and that's we love that one because it allows total remote control of zoom, iris, and focus of the camera through that system. And this shows you a setup in our lab where we were testing it very recently, showing the 300 Mark III there. And that was a shot on the other side where we were playing with configurations we were learning. And now we're going to take this out to the marketplace and see what the reaction will be. We think the lightweight of it, and in fact, that rig there, once you remove the teleprompter, can be actually put on your shoulder. We have some pictures of that. I don't have them here, but that can be a shoulder mount with that fiber capability.
It gives a lot of production companies that maybe do a lot of sports, the capability of using a camera in a different shoot. If, say, they're doing an ESPN-style talk, but they want that shallow depth of field because of fans or whatever being, not safe for work kind of stuff behind them or whatever. And then you can go shoot, football with it if you wanted to.
Exactly.
On another day. And that's handy. Being able to use a camera in multiple situations just saves people money, and we're in a time where people are saving money.
Indeed. And then that's it on the camera. I'm just going to wrap up now with just a quickie on a reference display. It's one we introduced.
Quick question on the camera.
Yeah, sure.
When is it available, and how much is it?
The C300 Mark III, just give me a moment, will be $10,999. Rob, if I'm wrong there, would you correct me? I believe it's $10,999 for the camera.
And when will people be able to expect it?
That again will be available this year, but no definitive date yet until we get through the current situation.
Okay, let's move on to the HDR reference display.
Yeah, now this is one we introduced last year, but would have been shown for the first time at NAB, and it's a 31-inch reference display, and it has some wonderful specs for HDR. It has 2,000 nits, full screen white, 2,000 nits. This is pretty unique at this moment. And then a black of 001 nits. So that's a 2 million to 1 contrast ratio. And that meets the Dolby Vision, their top spec. So we think this is going to be of great interest in the post-production world. In addition to that, We have other displays, 17-inch, 24-inch, and they've had various HDR ranges. Typically, their blacks were 005, but we have a new firmware coming out for those, all of those displays that will take them down to 001. And on the 17-inch, we had two versions, one with a 300 peak for the full screen white. We will have a firmware available later this year that will take that up to 600. And we had a 600 unit that we'd be able to take up to 1,000 nits. So we're elevating both directions on these established displays while we bring in this new, if you will, flagship for post-production.
Are those firmware updates free for those who already own the reference
The ones
display?
related to the black extension will be free. The ones related to the elevation of the full screen white will be, there will be a charge for those.
I've been in a color suite. I understand the reason why to have a very nice reference display, but for someone who may not know, can you explain why there are displays like this and what their uses are?
Well, yes, in HDR, it's very important to understand that HDR is all about the capability of capturing more highlight detail, but equally important, capturing low light detail. So driving the black down, and if you have cameras coming out with 15 stops, and now we will have the 16 plus stop with the C300 Mark III, the shooter now and the director have the capability, depending on what they're shooting, to be able to do justice to those moody, dark scenes full of color detail way down in the shadows. They will be able to capture those and lift them out in post-production and reproduce them beautifully. And perhaps in some of those scenes, there may be some speculars. And then the 2000 nit or the 1000 nit, depending on the display that you're using, will allow you to capture those. There are scenes that where both are present in the same scene. And that's what HDR is all about, is give you more down in the shadows while simultaneously being able to do justice to speculars. And in our displays, we have a lot of tools now that we've working with all of those who've been experimenting with HDR and wide color gamuts over the last 2 or 3 years. We got a lot of requests, can you help us expose on set HDR? So we put in false colors. You can pull that up on the menu, and each color is related to a specific digital code in the 10-bit code of a PQ or an HLG. We also allow you to pull up a waveform monitor in the display, right on the screen, and then you can select that waveform monitor to be a PQ up to 4,000 nits, or an HLG up to 2,000 nits, or a Canon log up to 2,000 nits. So you can play with the display. It'll give you the IREs and the nits displayed there. We also give you measurement tools that if you're sort of scratching your head on a highlight and you sort of say, well, I want to keep this at 1,000 nits. What is that highlight? So you can put a little pinpoint on that highlight, and on the display it'll say this is 542 nits or it's 1,200 nits. It gives you an absolute measurement of the nit. And we're just adding in one of our firmware upgrades that you can also pull up the CIE diagram on the display and see where that highlight is in the color gamut. So you'll get a brightness and an RGB assessment of where it is. So these are tools that we've been progressively rolling out based on all that we're learning, working in partnership with all those folks doing the HDR work. And the HDR, there's work going on, obviously, in the episodic television and movie. But equally important, for the last 2 years, there's been strenuous work going on in the sporting world, broadcast sports in HDR with most of the networks and Fox Sports and all these good folks.
You have to be able to see what you're shooting, and it's nice to see a reference monitor that might be in a suite for a colorist or for an editor, but you can also go out into the field and use it as an exposure monitor. So if you're like a DP who does some editing or needs to color at home or their space, you could ideally move one monitor back and forth. Is that correct?
That's correct. That is correct.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Brian. This was great. And thank you for the time.
Thank you for talking through everything with me, from broadcast lenses and hand controls to the C300 Mark III, which sounds like an incredible camera. I can't wait to try it out. 16 stops dynamic range, and the DGO seem incredible. The 25-250, it's another lens I am going to have to experience. I love that range. And the reference to display. Thank you for taking the time.
Can I add one addendum?
Of course you can.
Yeah. I don't know why I didn't mention it. In the 500 Mark II and in the 300 Mark III, there are two things that are very interesting. One is built-in electronic image stabilization.
Oh, yes.
And that in the cameras, we gave a lot of optimization of the algorithm of that for when you're hand holding the camera and you're running and walking. You get a very unique perturbation, if you will. And we've optimized it for that. Now, there's obviously other things that can disturb the camera, wind and vibration and things like that. But it's one of those things where we're very eager to get feedback from the marketplace to tell us, how well have we done that. Early reports on the 500 Mark II are very encouraging, but it's still early days. The other one that intrigues me, because we have to have folks like you comment on it, we, for the first time, have brought diffraction correction into motion imaging. We've been putting diffraction correction into our still photography cameras at the high end for the last 5 or 6 years, perhaps. And now we've moved it into motion imaging. Now, what this does is, obviously, as you stop down, diffraction starts to chew away at your texture and your fine resolution. Mm-hmm. And this electronically restores that. It tracks the aperture. That's being reported into the camera, into the 300 Mark III. And in there's an algorithm that will restore texture. It's subtle. It's not sharpening. It's not detail enhancement. It's a restoration of texture. But it's one of those things that it's because it's new. We think it's totally new in motion imaging. We do need the eyes of folks like you and DPs to look at this and say, well done, Canon, or this is not so exciting. We do need that feedback. So keep an eye on that one if you get your hands on the camera.
No, that is exciting. I mean, when we talked about the old 25-250 I owned, which is an old 70s era Ingenue, the diffraction and fringing and everything else was the reason I got rid of it. So anything that can make an image better, I'm old enough. I'm old. I'm middle-aged, if you guys don't understand. I realize and accepted tools that make my life easier as a cameraman, and image stabilization and anything else in the camera that someone might consider a cheat. I am taking that and running with it, as you should too.
Well, make a point of evaluating those two things for me when you get your hands on. I'd love to hear back from you.
I will absolutely run as many tests of those as I can. Thank you for taking the time with me. And
my pleasure, Brian.
A pleasure is all mine.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.